Here's lecture 2 on the cannabinoid and the body lecture series. All right, we're going to talk about the endocannabinoid system and the basics of what it is, and it's amazing and cool. So the endocannabinoid system, it is present in every system of the body in all animals, except I think insects. And the endocannabinoid system is in all animals and actually predates the cannabis plant. I find this very cool. So all animals have an endocannabinoid system. It's even in sea squirts, which evolved 600 million years ago. So this has been around in bodies for hundreds of millions of years. The plant, the cannabis plant, only evolved 34 million years ago. So it's probably that the plant evolved because animals have this system in their body. Now, what it does, it's important for homeostasis, maintaining steady state. It may be the most important physiological system for controlling steady state and homeostasis. What happens is there's a trigger, stress or injury, inflammation, illness, something will happen that will kick in the endocannabinoid system to try and maintain balance. It also is going to fine-tune and balance the other neurotransmitter systems in the body if they overact. So try and keep things steady state. Now what they say is that the basic functions of the endocannabinoid system is relax, eat, sleep, forget, and protect. And we'll talk about this later, but I would add reproduce to that. Because it is all over the reproductive system. So relax, eat, sleep, forget, protect, reproduce, which is just a fabulous weekend right there. So this is one of the reasons also that cannabis might be such good medicine, is because its job in the body is to regulate. Other drugs produce an effect, but cannabis is all about balance. Too little, too much don't work. You need the balance. And one more thing about the endocannabinoid system, it's variable. Everybody's endocannabinoid system is different. So what are the components of the endocannabinoid system? Well, let me give you the term first, cannabinoids. Cannabinoids are substances that interact with cannabinoid receptors, which are all over our body. Endocannabinoids are inside our body. Endo means within the body. Endocannabinoids, our body makes them. Phytocannabinoids, those come from the plant, P for plant, that's THC, CBD, and then there's synthetic ones that you make in the lab, spice and marinol. We've talked about these. We're going to talk about the endocannabinoids. So the endocannabinoid system is a widespread system throughout pretty much every organ system in the body, and it controls so many processes. It affects your heart and your gut and inflammation and your brain and pain and so many different systems. The components of the ECS, the endocannabinoids, which we'll talk about in just a minute, the enzymes that synthesize and break down your endocannabinoids and your phytocannabinoids, and then cannabinoid receptors, CB1 and CB2. And these are the most widespread metabotropic receptors. They are all over. They're the basal ganglia, cerebellum, hippocampus. You can read this list, but they're all over the body. And we will talk about their significance of why they are in these organ systems later on. But let's start with the endocannabinoids. First one, it's called anandamide, from the Sanskrit word for bliss. It was discovered in 92 by Raphael Mechoulam, Devane and Haynes. And these bind and activate CB1 and CB2 receptors. So anandamide is the first endocannabinoid discovered. 2-AG, 2-arachidonoglycerol, not as romantic a name, that was discovered a few years later, that also binds. And then there's a few other that are potential endocannabinoids. So there are a few that, oh, this one might be as well. So there's a number of things. They'll probably find more. Anandamide gets a lot of the attention. 2-AG is actually more potent. It binds to cannabinoid receptors much more than anandamide does. But I don't have to worry about that now. Now, endocannabinoids, not surprisingly, we know these are unusual. They're not like most other neurotransmitters. We synthesize them on demand rather than store them in vesicles, and they go backwards. Now we need enzymes. We have to create these endocannabinoids. So there are synthetic enzymes, and unusual, but these are located postsynaptically because of that whole retrograde transmission thing. Because we synthesize these endocannabinoids out of the cell membrane postsynaptically and then send them mostly back to the presynaptic neurons. So most of these enzymes that create endocannabinoids are postsynaptic. And don't have to worry about what they are for this class. Don't have to worry about what the enzymes are. But there is one I do want to mention, FAAH, fatty acid amide hydrolase. And that is an enzyme that breaks down your endocannabinoids. Now, why I'm mentioning this is because if you have lower levels of FAAH, then you're not breaking down your endocannabinoids and you have naturally higher levels. And this woman here, this very happy, smiley woman, her name is Jo Cameron, and it's a cool story. A number of years ago, she had a very painful surgery, what is normally a painful surgery. And she didn't report feeling any pain. She just said she was just fine. Then she had another painful surgery, and nope, she reported pretty much no pain. They did more tests on her. They give her a test to measure anxiety. And she scored a 0 on the anxiety test. Nobody scores a 0. I think I get a 7 when I'm actually asleep. But she scored a 0 on the anxiety test. So low pain, low anxiety, and she has a bad memory. What turns out is she has a deletion, what's called a microdeletion of the pseudogene, this copy of this gene. But basically she's having a Fa out gene. She has a mutation that she doesn't have FAAH. So she has naturally high levels of her endocannabinoids. So she has less pain, less anxiety, and not the best memory in the whole world. So some other drugs work to inhibit Fa. COX-2. All right, so COX-2 is an enzyme. COX-1 and COX-2, and what they do is they metabolize anandamides. You've heard of NSAIDs, I'm sure. Ibuprofen and Aleve, these are NSAIDs. These are COX-2 inhibitors, and they may also inhibit Fa. So NSAIDs that inhibit COX-2 may also boost your anandamide levels. That might be one of the ways that ibuprofen and Tylenol as well, in a different mechanism, though, that these pain relievers that we take over the counter, they may be working on your endocannabinoid system. So I just had to throw that in there because I find it cool. All right, the last component of the endocannabinoid system are your cannabinoid receptors. We have officially named CB1 and CB2. So cannabinoid 1 and cannabinoid 2. We may have unofficially decided there's cannabinoid 3, but these are unusual and they are ubiquitous. They are all over the place. And we will talk about cannabinoid receptors in later videos, but I will say they are everywhere. The body is actually 4 times more cannabinoid receptors than dopamine 2 receptors, and 12 times more than we have opioid receptors. There are a ton of them, and they're located all over the place. Now, in the next video, we're going to talk about the ways that substances bind to receptors. It's a little bit on something called pharmacodynamics, but it'll help explain so you can understand when I say things bind to a receptor, they bind in different ways. So we're going to take a little journey to look at the different ways things bind to receptors. And then in later videos, we'll talk about these receptors, where they are, and what they do.